we said, these are things we identify right now. From this point for the next 6 months, we will not entertain any submittals while we look at our pending ordinance to study and evaluate a proposed change to our regulations. John, do you want to comment on that at all?
So Rob, so it sounds to me like the starting point is to decide what you want as a CBD. And that's going to include some non-conforming zoning right now. But you just have to work towards that as you develop what the CBD plan is. And as people want to sell their property or change it, then it's based on that plan instead of what's already there. I mean, I don't see that you can force anybody out, but you can begin to make a transition. I mean, this thing in Ogden just didn't happen in 4 or 5 years. It's a long process.
But you got to start somewhere, John. You're
right. Yeah, but you need to decide what you want for the CBD. And there's going to be property in there that doesn't conform right now. You know, you can change what the zone is, but you can't tell somebody you got to tear down their house and move out. It's got to be a transition thing.
Greg, this is Grant Protzman. Tell me a little bit about that stopgap measure you were discussing. Was that challenged in court? Has it been upheld in other courts in Utah or anywhere in the U.S.? Because that seems like something we could recommend that they pass right now to bring all the craziness to a halt for a little while.
Yeah, that pending ordinance, you have a 6-month time frame to have it completed. So whatever you're saying, we're going to stop to study this, not take any more. You have 6 months to complete it and have it adopted, whatever you're looking at. And yeah, there is generally a process. I'm not sure with North Ogden. We had, of course, the mayor and the chief administrative officer first give us the green light. Yes, we can do that. It is allowed in state law, but you got to make sure you notice it properly and have it posted that these are the things you're doing. And you got to be specific of what are the changes you're making.
Okay. Are there any downsides to that process? You know, it sounds to me like it's 6 months to let us get our act together. And I think we all feel we could use that kind of time rather than having stuff approved willy-nilly right now.
The downside may be, there may be a project that's coming in at the location maybe you want. And you say, oh, but they got a great design, but you can't say, oh, because you're good design and they're bad design. They're all in the same boat.
You're locked out from everything.
Yes.
For a short period of time.
Right.
Didn't the city already try something or do something like this as we were looking at form-based code? If I remember correctly, there was like a certain time frame that we had. John Call, does that sound, am I not remembering that correct?
We did do that. So during the form-based code discussion, we did a proposed language change, which is what Greg's talking about. You have to have the specific language of the ordinance that you're considering. And we specifically were saying that in specifically it was the residential zones that we weren't going to allow for those higher density residential projects to be approved within a certain distance of the road. So it was a modification to the R4 zone, but it was to accomplish this type of purpose that we didn't want a project to slide in during those discussion times. As you know, the form-based code wasn't passed, and that because we didn't take action on that ordinance, the ordinance lapsed. But we're back in the time frame again where we could do another ordinance like that if we wanted to. It will require specific language that says this is the type of thing we're moving towards. And that language can be tweaked, but it needs to be, most courts would say, substantially similar, so it's accomplishing the same goals, if that makes sense.
Would that require us, if we're talking about a CBD zone, to include that language in all of the zones that we have in the downtown, Southtown area, you know, like our CP1, CP2, C1, C2, you know,
MP1.
MP, yeah. Would we have to make sure that we're hitting all of those, or how would that work?
There's two different ways to approach it. One is to go zone by zone and talk about the nuances that you want to include. The other would be to go in and do an overlay zone and establish the boundaries of those zones and establish that was going to take precedent over the underlying zone. That would probably be the easier approach, but might be the harder to enforce because it might cause some confusion. So, yeah.
But it seems to me if we want to establish a CB zone, that's the approach we ought to take. We need to define what we want as that and then let it affect all of the zones that are within it.
John, this is Mark Brown. Question for you on that. And I heard this comment, I don't know if Julie made it or not, but Julie, you were talking the Central Business District, which is the 2600 North area, correct?
Well, I don't know. I
Then
think
the
that's what we
southern,
need to
the southern one
establish.
is Kurtz, basically, correct? In the cannery. Is that what I'm hearing on the two zones?
I'm not, Rob Scott, you can kind of answer that. If I'm not mistaken, we have like I think Greg Montgomery mentioned it. We have like the 2600 area, and then we have like the cannery area, and then we have 1700 as another area where, because it goes all the way from 1700 to somewhere past 2600. I'm not exactly sure how far up north it goes. From what I could gather, it doesn't go very far. And so I guess one of the things we need to discuss as a committee is, is this something that we want to consider as a CB zone? CBD zone, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't think we know what we want to discuss yet. Dawn, just a question for you from planning. Is there any real slam dunk project that's in the works right now that we wouldn't want to, that we would lose if we put a 6-month moratorium on this?
7-Eleven, what is that? Where is that sitting?
Yeah.
The 7-Eleven is in that area and they're well under there. Yeah, there's there isn't anything we can do about that one.
Okay.
Where's the 7-Eleven going?
How the
corner
7-Eleven?
The corner of
1700
and 1700 and
Washington Boulevard.
Washington.
Okay.
Has that been presented and voted on by council?
The council already went in and made convenience stores and gas stations and allowed use. So they can't rescind it after these guys have already been working on it.
Of the MPC zone.
Yeah.
That came with the car wash?
It was before the car wash, but
Oh,
it was done at a different time. But they changed the
allowed uses.
the development agreement to allow. First, they did the gas station, made that an allowed use, and then at another meeting they changed it and it allowed. I believe it was these were different meetings.
Okay, just to move things along, are we going to discuss this interim thing and then make a recommendation to the mayor and the city council? I think we want to discuss it maybe a little bit more. Do we want to do that now or put that off until after Greg finishes his presentations?
Okay, so can people give me an idea? Maybe just make a comment on your feelings about this, about putting the moratorium on for 6 months, where you're at, just so I can kind of get an idea of who is yay and nay.
I would say that we need to put a 6-month moratorium, as we already missed the chance to make a walkable downtown. And with the fast building that we have going on, if we don't have a defined CBD district, what we want, what we envision, and we continue to let any type of building or zoning going on, we're going to lose the
Absolutely.
opportunity to have a structured downtown which is what
I
we're talking.
agree.
Okay. So,
Mark Brown
John
agrees.
Arrington, I'm in favor of the 6-month period.
Right.
okay, John, is there anybody against it? I guess that might be the easiest way to go about it.
Can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
Is it a firm 6 months or is that just a guess?
It has to be 6 months. After
Yeah.
6 months, it's back to normal.
Okay, so if we don't finish in time, then it's just gone, disappears.
So you
Correct.
could still be
Okay.
moving on the process, but someone could make a submittal after that 6 months. If you don't have things in, it's based
Come
on
on,
your
Dan.
existing ordinance.
I know you got something to say, Dan Nixon. What do you got to say?
Getting to have a chance. Thank you all for your comments. As a developer, I'm usually against moratoriums, but I see where this is going. I just think that we should make the realization that a year ago, the city council had an opportunity to approve a new form-based code and it was rejected. So I don't know that the city had their chance and they lost it, in my opinion, to do it a year ago. And all of this development that's been going on for the last year is their fault for not passing that form-based code. It's not our fault as a committee to try and make it right, like we've been trying. So I think some of the fault
Amen.
falls
I agree.
on
Yeah, but I see our position is to make them recommendation. It's still up to them what they want to do with it.
Well,
if you put a moratorium on, which fine, put a moratorium on, but I don't think, maybe you got a new council and they'll figure out how to get the proper code, but you can't just keep pushing, kicking the can down the road by putting moratoriums on when the city council won't act and develop a code.
Dan, just a couple comments on that. Number one, the folks who were involved in putting that together, had we all been in that city council meeting, I doubt the response would have been what it was. Number two, I have no intention of kicking this down the road. I think everybody on this committee is serious about making something happen and getting some things in place ASAP. And so I recommend that we ask the city council to establish the moratorium, and we be willing to do what it takes to get our act together out here.
Okay, so we've had a recommendation. Do we have a second on that?
I second it, Mark Brown.
Okay.
But one other thing for the group, we had a general steering meeting committee when Mayor Taylor was around, and we designated the 2 zones. And I don't know where that disappeared to.
Well, I think that's what they voted down at this meeting last year.
Can I give a little historical background?
Please,
Please.
Rob.
Okay, let's first of all, let's don't confuse the general plan process with the development of code. So the identification of the within the general plan of the geographic differences between downtown and Southtown as they've become to be known has in effect been adopted. That is part of our general plan.
Okay.
So where we are right now is that we have signed a contract with a consulting firm to help us revamp our city ordinances. Our ordinances were last comprehensively looked at clear back in 2002. So it's been a long time. And as such, we are in the process of, and we have hired a consultant to work with us. And one of the things that we have been trying to formulate is just how do we want to approach as part of that project, whether it's something that our own staff writes or whether the consultants write it, is to identify what are the frameworks for what we want to see in that downtown area and the Southtown area. The reason we have Greg on is to just give you a little smattering of their approach, and there may be some transferences from that approach to what we want to do in North Ogden, and maybe not. But in any case, it's a good opportunity for us to start thinking some of those issues through. So my personal thought on this is we take a look at first of all, do we recognize the basic principles that are in the general plan? It sounds like that there's a pretty much of an agreement that we should be doing something. If the group is in agreement that we want to move forward, then staff is going to start putting together an outline as to how that potentially could work and some options. And so I don't have a timeline in mind, but I do know that this is a high priority as far as the planning staff is concerned. We're going to put some real effort into this to see if we can't pull it together.
So Rob, I have a question. It's Julie Anderson. I have a question. So would this 6-month moratorium affect what you're doing?
Possibly. I think what I'd like to do is discuss some options with our consultant, with John, and come back to you with a process with some options that we can go forward with.
How much input will we as a committee have on this?
My understanding is, well, yeah. As part of that process, we are, in fact, I had a discussion with our consultants today. That was one of the questions they asked, was what kind of a public involvement process. I described to them that this committee has a real interest in that, and we would certainly go forward with having you intimately involved in the discussion of these particular options and framework and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's something we most probably need, because otherwise we're going to be at odds with each other. You know, the committee's going to have one idea, maybe the consultants will have another idea. And if there's no communication between the two, we're just going to create more problems than we're actually solving.
Right.
And so, you know, I think as a committee, I'm sure we would all most probably like to have some input on this. I mean, that's kind of why we're on these committees, you know, is as citizens, is to give the input that needs to be given. Because the consultants, they don't live here. They don't experience what we experience on a daily basis.
Right.
They don't, you know, they're not left with whatever they give to us. And so I think it's really important that as a committee, we have quite a bit of say in this. And that's why I still think this 6-month moratorium. But Rob, if you would look into that and let us know, but I really think we need to do this 6-month moratorium. I think we need to look at it, because I'm seeing more and more where we're turning commercial back into residential, the R4s, and we're doing away with the commercial. And we need to make decisions on those things as I watch what's gone on down by the Walker Theatre. You know, the gentleman wanted to go, 6 months earlier, we'd done a commercial area. And then he comes in and says, now I want an R4 because we couldn't get anything commercial wise to come in there. And so I think, you know, it kind of worries me a little bit that we as citizens sometimes, I think, are not listened to very well. This is my world according to Julie. But I've had a lot of time to think about it because I'm home with nothing to do. And when you're sick with the COVID, your life expectancy then comes into play. And so, you know, we have a great, it does. You have no idea, Rob. It really does. You start thinking, oh my gosh. And so I think as a committee, from what I'm getting, we really want to approach the city council about this 6-month moratorium. And so Rob, maybe you and John Collin and the committee can maybe come up with something that can be presented to this committee related to the 6-month moratorium. I can't even speak anymore. Anybody have any thoughts, Grant?
Yeah, Julie, let me clarify something with Rob. Isn't there a bifurcation here of responsibility in that we kind of picture and then they put it into legal terms in code? Isn't that really the bifurcation we're looking at?
Well, what we are going to be doing is we will be identifying not only the process, but we'll be devising options for how to approach this. If you happen to look at my memo that hopefully you got attached, there's 3 options down at the bottom there, commercial code options.
Right.
And as a part of that, any one of those 3 potentially could work. But the bottom line is, what is it that we see as a community that we want to see put in place for these areas?
Right, so basically what you want is somebody like this committee to draw the picture, and then they put the legalese into place to implement that picture. And I think that's a great way to go ahead, but we're gonna have to meet more than once a month if we're gonna have this thing done in 6 months.
Agreed.
Well, and
Let me ask-
I have no problem at all with putting information out on a more timely basis than once a month, so.
Right.
Rod, this is John. I got a question. So you've hired this firm. Is their job to look at our ordinances and see what's in conflict with each other? I don't know that they're writing the ordinance that we're talking about. Or isn't that what your job is, yours and John's?
As I mentioned, what they're tasked with is to take a look at our existing ordinances and to update them. You can imagine how out of date after 20 years and the things that have gone on in the community, how out of date things are.
Right.
So
Plus,
an
there's
awful lot
probably
of
some,
a lot of this is going to be reorganization. It'll be identifying how our codes either match up or are deficient when it comes to being consistent with the state code. It's going to reorganize our processes. It's really a comprehensive look at the entire code.
So who
It's
have
like-
we hired? What is this firm? Who is it we've hired?
The name of the firm is Logan Simpson.
Thank
and,
you.
And they're out of they're all over the place, but the person that we're working with is in Colorado, but they've subcontracted some of the work with, you see John Jansen's face on the screen. He's waving to you. And also to Meg Ryan from the Utah League of Cities and Towns. So we have a definite working relationship with people that know Utah. And
Hey.
the benefit that they bring to us is that they've had experience in lots of communities. So we can draw upon them, similar to what we're doing tonight with Greg, getting his input and his experience with similar circumstance. So.
Rob, this is Dan. I've got a question for John Jansen. It's good to see
Yeah.
him again. I remember John was on the committee with Civil Solutions that was hired as a consultant when we did this 3 years ago or 4. What is different that we're going to do now than what we did 3 years ago? Because I thought we did a pretty good job 3 years ago. The council just didn't act on it. What are we going to do?
What we did then was we were updating our general plan. This is actually taking a look at the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance and going through those and revamping them so that they're
You would call
consistent
this
with our general plan.
This would be a follow-up.
So I'm going to step in here. John, you're muted. So if you can unmute your mic.
Okay, there it is.
There it is. Yeah, if you could share maybe some things
Yeah.
really briefly with us, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Glad to do that. First, we did set this up in the general plan, and Rob's done a nice job of pulling that information together in this couple-page memo, where we did talk about downtown and Southtown and some things that needed to be done. So I think there is Grant. Hi, Grant. How you doing?
Good to see
There is a vision there. It probably needs refinement. I was going to say that our contract at this point does not include doing this kind of work, but it is, I think, an important step. As you see there from Rob's memo, all those zones together create kind of a hodgepodge, as he's mentioned, and consolidating in some manner and creating these two distinct nodes, the downtown and the Southtown, just makes a ton of sense. These are the kinds of things that happen after the general plan, and I understand the form-based code didn't make it, but I really thought Greg was actually kind of suggesting some of the things that are in form-based codes, which is more definitive than, I did look at, Greg, your CBD one today, which is very general.
Very general.
Yeah. The state law really is asking us to be more definitive in general. So,
Well, John, isn't that a benefit to developers also because they have crystal clear guidelines and they can make plans?
yeah. So they know what they need to do, and
Right.
you know what you're going to get. And I think that's really the goal of all these zones is understanding what kind of development you're going to get there. So hopefully that was short and succinct.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions? So if
Yes.
we made it, go ahead.
I do.
Go ahead, Meg.
I think, how do I word this? I don't know how to word. I feel like we can all make the plans and even put a 6-month moratorium. But if the city council doesn't feel the pressure to take action and to see the CBD as we see it or we plan it, again, that 6 months will elapse. So while I'm for this 6-month moratorium, I also question how we can put pressure on the city council to actually move towards whatever plan we see fit. While I didn't love form-based code, I did like that it was an actual plan that could be put in place. And I would say that that's what our city council is lacking. They know that I'm pretty vocal about how I think they're kind of slow moving and they don't plan very well. And so I would love to find out a way to put more pressure on them to actually make a definitive decision on how they see a central business district.
Well, we know where they live.
Can we, John?
Go ahead,
John, this
Mark.
is Mark. Is there any way that we could get on the agenda for a city council meeting to update them as to what we're doing?
Are you addressing John Call?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize to John Arrington.
There's so many Johns on right now. John Call, that question was for you.
So yeah, it's not hard to put that on the agenda. You know, usually the mayor would be here with us tonight. And
The mayor did sneak in.
oh, the mayor's here.
Oh, Mayor.
We had a little
Welcome aboard.
drive-by. Person in our area died, so.
Oh,
But so we, anyways, we just need to put it on the agenda. I think the next available one would be the 12th of May or the 26th.
Well, that sounds good. And Meg and Julie would make great spokesmen for us.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
So something you should be aware of, and that is that the City Council and Planning Commission a couple of weeks ago had a joint work session where they talked about, not this specifically, but that was one of the adjunct subjects. We talked and gave them an update on the overall project for the update of our code. So they're not unaware of it. And I didn't sense from anyone, either on the council or the planning commission, that they were at all hesitant about going forward with this type of a process. John
But then,
and the mayor,
I mean, I have to
chime in.
question though, because a member of the city council, and I could be mistaken, but a member of the city council has a vested interest on the development going on at 1700. And so I could be completely mistaken talking out of my butt. I see Dan shaking his head. I could be wrong, but I mean.
No, Meg, you're right. I think Councilman Severing on a piece of property there. I don't know if it's the exact one, but his family does own a piece of property over there that's looking at storage units. So I
I
think
think he's been
you're
called
right.
out as a conflict just because
Yeah, he's already acknowledged that.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's a very honorable man, no doubt about it. So what I'm saying though is that question and that push of what we want a downtown to look like, that can be complicated when we have different things going on amongst the city council. So I think it'd be great to be on the agenda to discuss that.
Right.
I think
Mayor?
that our position is, right now, we want them to set the 6-month moratorium. We can't determine,
yes.
have enough time to affect every decision they're gonna make. And what is downtown, what's south downtown. What we want right now is the moratorium so that we can all have time to have this
Yeah.
question.
John Arrington, I totally agree. And I think from what I've gathered from when I put out there, we want that to happen.
Mhm.
And so I totally agree that it should be put on the agenda. I think we need to, as a committee, present our thoughts and our feelings and how we want to move, why we've asked for this, so that they kind of understand. So I guess at this point, Mayor, a question to you. I got voted in as the vice chair for this meeting. And so I'm not quite sure. Grant Protzman made the proposition, and Mark Brown seconded it to do the moratorium. How do I go from here as far as getting yay and nay votes? I mean,
All development,
I'm sorry?
what kind of a moratorium are we suggesting? All development in the city?
We're looking at the commercial areas, really.
Yeah, I think we're just looking at what we want for the downtown commercial strip.
Well,
Yeah.
We can't stop everything.
We should be specific about moratorium. 'Cause
Okay.
you can't say you just want to shut down all development.
Okay. Oh, come on, Dan, don't be a party pooper.
Well, and let me add a little piece.
I totally agree.
Can Rob, is there a way that you could write something up that our opinions and our feelings? Is there a way we could write something up and have that ready to present to the city council on the 12th?
I'm looking to my boss for that answer.
So let me explain that there are two nuances, and moratorium, I think, is not the right word for what we're allowed to do.
Okay.
What we're allowed to do is adopt a temporary land use ordinance, which means we put some rules in place that people have to follow. But that does require us to have some rules in place. A moratorium, Pleasant View did it a couple of years ago because they ran out of water. They didn't have any water they could dedicate. So they were allowed to do a moratorium on building because they had a health and safety issue that they could stop development. So that's the big thing is to put something before the city council, we'll have to have some specific language that would be what rules someone who has a right or who wants to build would fall under.
Okay.
And it could be something very specific as, if you want to develop, you have to do, this setback, this density, this type of thing. But we have to, the way the state rule is written is we have to give them the chance to still develop. We can't just tell them they have to stop. So that might cause a little bit of nuance in trying to tweak the information or tweak the ordinance, if that makes sense.
So can we work on that in the next few days? Maybe committee members, if you have some suggestions as to how this should be worded, and maybe send them into John Call through his email. John, does that sound like a way to start?
Yeah, because that gives some language that can be presented to the council.
Okay, all right.
I think, John.
How about the committee, Grant, your feeling?
Consensus at the committee is we want to look at the commercial areas. So I just flip that over, and say, John, why don't you write something up and send it out to us that basically puts as much of a restriction on development in this downtown, these three downtown areas we're talking about, as we can, and then shoot it out to us.
Well, so the question is the goal of the new ordinance, and I'm not talking the temporary land use ordinance, but the ultimate goal of the ordinance is to promote a certain type of development, not to restrict development. That's my understanding, because what the state code says you have to do is what you pass as your temporary ordinance should be the direction you're headed. It shouldn't be the opposite direction. So I can put something together, I think, that says this is the type of development that is allowed, and make sure those standards are high enough that they would be the type of development that everyone would like to see.
Right.
It would be harder to get it to come in and say, I mean, what I'm saying is you couldn't come in and say, okay, we're going to require all this property is now zoned for one house to 10 acres and then come in 6 months with an ordinance that is the opposite direction that encourages commercial development.
Is
The
there,
court frown on that. So
John, this is Mark. Is there something that Ogden City has written up when they face their situation that we could possibly use as a template going forward?
Good thought, Mark.
we will. Greg is leaning forward to tell us of all the wonderful stuff we can steal from him.
Right.
In the past, when we have done this, some of them have been, like I said, very specific. One was, we are looking at a pending ordinance regarding no downtown drive-in restaurants, storage units, and a couple other things we identified and said, so that was very specific, that this is what we're working towards. Others that we've done have looked at kind of a concept, for example, housing in a commercial zone. And we said, we're looking at improving our design standards, our requirements of open space, our locations away from key commercial properties. And so we tied it that way.
Good.
Trying to think of another one, but they really, as John has outlined, they kind of said, these are what we're working towards, and we're very specific of things that we wanted people to still be able to develop and do certain things, but knowing that these specific items would be under scrutiny and possible changes happening in that 6-month time frame.
Fine.
So Greg, there are some things you can say, we don't want these in the area.
Yeah, we for example, we did that with the storage units and the drive-in restaurants.
Good.
Okay.
There's no way to go back and say we want Country Boy Dairy back, is there? I wish.
Grant, I'll top you one better. Remember the old Husky oil station there?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so I think we've kind of come to a decision on this particular area that we want to do some kind of language and a presentation to the city council to really get their attention. John, if you would be willing to put that together, and you're more than welcome to call and talk to me about what your feelings are and your thinking are, or to, I'm sure to anybody on the council, to give you the help that you need. You have the expertise in that area that none of us have. So I apologize for putting you even more on your plate, but that's kind of where we're going. Is everybody okay with that? Does anybody have any concerns about that decision?
Nope, I just like to have John shoot it out to us before it goes to the city council so we can provide feedback if necessary. That's all.
So then, Meg, are you willing to do a presentation with me at the city council on whichever date, the 12th or the 24th? Was that what you said, John?
No, I'm gonna go out and lick doorknobs. I ain't going to that speaking. You do it, Julie. I'm gonna lick doorknobs.
So here's the thing, maybe you and I can work together on the presentation, and I can do the presentation and you can do the language. How about that?
I love it. I love it.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Who's talking?
This is Christina.
Hi, Christina.
I am new to this group, but I was under the impression that this committee has been kind of a reawakened and is meeting more frequently now than they were before. If that's the case, I'm wondering if there's a coincidence that there's more committee members and there's more meetings and all of this is happening at the same time this code is being rewritten and we have this consultant hired. If that's a coincidence or if that was the purpose here, fill me in.
Well, originally, how do we put it? It was originally reactivated. It was a committee and there were people that were on it, but they've been dormant for a while. And we started talking, but we came in and we did, we were talking about lower, moderate income housing is where we started, and how we fulfilled the SB 53, I believe, guidelines that were given by the state through legislation on how much moderate income housing we had. At which point we kind of came up with a plan that said, okay, these work. We already had 3 of them in place. We added a couple on that we felt like were useful. But then we realized that maybe it was time to start looking at the general plan again, and deciding whether we needed to have some changes made, and different things. And so what happened is we had some people who stepped away from the committee, so they had to be replaced. And then, so that's how this now committee is in place. And so starting in the first of the year, but I'm not exactly sure when the consulting firm was picked, but Mayor, I believe that was after the first of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Because I remember asking myself then, what is the general steering committee going to be doing? Are we just making it look pretty? Yeah, we've got citizens and they're out there, again, world according to Julie. But that's kind of where it all started, was about September of last year. And now we have a larger committee because we actually have, in our general plan, the general plan is not, 3 pages worth of information. There's a lot of information. And so I think as a committee, we needed as much help as we could from all sections of the city. And as I look at it, I believe that's what Mayor Berube has done, is he's brought in people from all sections of life and in the city to be on this committee to, to put our input in.
Right.
And stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it sounds like this time that we are here to rewrite the general plan, but it just so happens, it is coincidence that it's happening
Yes.
at the same time this consultant is coming in.
Correct.
But like
yes.
you said earlier, I feel like there would be value to having more community voices participate in this kind of initiative.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad we could clarify that for you.
Yeah.
And I hope I told you right. I hope I
I
told
have
you
a
right.
I have a city council question. Since it's so much of a closed meeting now, how many people can go?
Anybody.
Anybody.
So we can still all show up and sit in the meeting 6 feet apart, right?
Well,
No, they do it like this.
They do it like this.
Yeah.
They do it on Zoom.
We do it on Zoom.
Just like this.
That's good.
Well,
So
but I'm just looking at the fact of, how we show support for what we've talked about.
Oh, absolutely. I think even through Zoom, I think if we individually send emails to each of our city reps, and don't do a bulk email. I've learned, having worked on Capitol Hill, bulk emails don't work. They delete those immediately because it's like, is it for me? I don't know. I don't care. And it's deleted. So send what you can send the same message, but do them each individually.
Right.
So that you're actually talking to them individually rather than, they get this big email, even though there's only 5 of them, it's the same thing. It's like, well, maybe it's not important to me. So
Yeah, I can
tell you
whether I can go there or just email them, but I prefer to go, but if they don't allow that, then.
Well, John, I can tell you, this is the mayor, and if you'll zoom in on us, we'll make sure you're heard. We're still having open comments from the public. So even though we're doing it Zoom, join in with us.
Okay, I just want to know the process.
I have a question though. Can I?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to process so I get where we're going and what we're talking about.
Okay.
You want to put this 6 months, but so I know we need the council to make some decisions. We're all kind of trying to figure out what's happening downtown, which way are we thinking of leaning? As I'm reading through the Southtown, downtown goals, it almost seems unrealistic. Like we've already made decisions that have taken us so far from those, I don't know. I mean, are we trying to make decisions more around what our general plan says? You know, the MPC at Village at Prominence Point has different allowances for different, I'm really confused as to, like, I know we decided 6 months, but 6 months of what?
Okay, so the
Which
impression
direction? What are we, what? You
So-
know,
Well,
Grant,
because
John,
walkable, I mean, we're still talking about walkable,
right.
but
Which is not.
we have a tire shop and a car wash and a 7-Eleven. So where is walkable? Are we still looking at walkable? Are we still wanting to require bigger sidewalks? And, you know, as I read through this, I'm like, this all sounds great, but where, how, what?
Yeah.
I mean, like, are we completely rebuilding our city?
That's
Can I
right.
address that as the parks and trails and open lands?
Okay,
What
Mark.
there was that we had in our master plan, we had a walkable trail that from any part of the city, you could get to another part of the city.
Mhm.
And that has been in place for quite some time.
Yeah.
But I think what they're talking about is more of a walkable downtown area.
Yeah, they're
Where
talking, I
people
mean, like, if you,
in one parking spot and then head to all their shopping.
yeah, I mean,
that.
there's a pedestrian bridge across Washington at 2600 in our general plan. I mean, that's like Las Vegas stuff. I don't understand. what
So
we're-
that's the reason we're gonna
Go
look
ahead,
at
John.
it for 6 months. I mean, that's what the 6 months will give us.
I get
to
that, but
discuss
we're only
discuss what that
talking
plan
about,
is.
Steph,
But
let
we're-
him finish.
okay.
Go ahead, John.
I mean, that's what the 6 month time period will give us to outline what we want for that area. Now, the fact of the matter is there are some things in there that won't conform with the new plan. But as Greg was explaining in Ogden, that was the case there. But as the purpose of that property changed, then it had to fit in with the new plan.
Yeah, and I understand that, but like John Call said, we need to, you know, we're just changing some wording in our zoning. You know, it's not a moratorium, but we have to have an idea of what that wording is going to be because it has to fit somewhat with what we're looking at doing after the 6 months. So we can't just throw some general thing out there. And as far as I understand, we're looking more at the zoning versus the actual general plan. And
Which supersedes the other, which is, are we following a general plan? Or are we following a CBD? Which
yeah,
is
I'm
following?
just confused because I know we're talking about the zoning and all of the zones and kind of combining them to make more of a CBD area. So it's not so hodgepodge with all these different zones. But then we also have a general plan that is giving this whole different idea of this area.
Yeah.
So are we
Well-
working on zoning? Are we working on general plan? Sorry, I just want to understand exactly.
Right.
So-
Okay, well,
Grant,
my vision on this whole thing is we're going to make sense out of all the conflicting things that are going on. And Mayor Berube, prophetically determined that this is a great time to put to redo the code. So bottom line is we come up with the picture we want and the committee puts it into code. And after 6 months is up, that'll be the plan for the city. And we'll have to take everything that's been out there on the table and figure out what we can salvage, and what we can't.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Good.
Do we need to do a little bit more of that before we present to the council so that we know exactly what we want
No.
for those 6 months?
But
Moratorium. Yeah.
I think we've tasked with John to come up with something, working like with Greg if he needs to on how they did it. So we're
Fantastic.
already there.
I mean, I
think
know
it's
we
gonna be-
talked about that. Again, I just wasn't sure if it was
Yeah.
more around,
So does that make you feel better, Steph? As to, I think what we're looking at is, I know in the memo that Rob sent us, the very last thing he talked about commercial zones, combining those C1, C2, CP1.
yes, and that's what
CP2.
I'm looking at, but I'm also seeing the general plan
Yeah.
I'm
And I
sorry, I'm
think,
not trying to be dumb and
No.
confusing. I just want to make sure that, you know.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, but we need the city to be aware that this is what we want. And the way we can do it is by putting this moratorium, land use stay, whatever we want to call it, on it right now to kind of somewhat slow down. Because if you look at what's going on,
No, yeah,
you know, we're building townhomes when we should have done it as a commercial area
yeah.
and stuff like that. So that is, I think, but the city needs to be aware. They need to be put on notice. Guys, here we come. This is what's going to happen. And that's why we need to present it to the city. But again, go ahead.
I agree, but if I heard John call correctly, he said we need to make sure that we're changing wording that will fit what we're doing. So we can't just say, we're doing this. We don't know what it is yet, but we're asking to stop for 6 months while we figure out what it is we're gonna do. Like we have to have some idea of
Right.
what it is we're gonna do.
Well,
We need
Go
a
ahead, Greg.
30,000 foot statement.
yeah,
And then in 6 months, we'll have,
right.
a
Yeah,
100-foot view.
right.
Yeah.
So
Is that
would
what
you
you're-
essentially say you'd put a stop or more guidelines on commercial building? Because if we're going to follow the general plan anyways, there shouldn't be any more residential there anyways. If we're looking at the 1700 and that area as the central business district, there shouldn't be any more high density or major residential building there anyways. It should be commercial. Correct?
Isn't the CBD zone just the zone that's part of the general plan? I mean, it's like an R20 or something else. It's just in the general plan, this is a CBD zone, and that's like any other zone that we're going to talk about. It's still part of the general plan. It's just a specific part.
So if you look at the general plan, it talks about that area being a mixed use area. So it's not strictly commercial.
Yeah,
It includes a mixed use of commercial, residential, and then we've got to figure out how manufacturing is going to fit into this thing. But
And is
that's-
MPC an official zone?
yes, it is.
Well, and I think the safeguard is John's going to shoot out to all of us
Yeah.
restrictions and so on before it goes to Meg and Julie to present. So
Right.
I'll feel comfortable with what's put together and what'll be presented to the council.
And guys, John Call, if you can, when you send it out, and I'm sure you'll do this, is send it out to everybody. And if anybody has a reply, please make sure that you reply to all, not just back to John, so that we can all see what you're saying also, because that will also help us understand where you're coming from. So Steph, if you see something you're like, oh, I don't like it, or Meg, anybody, they can come back and we can all see that as a committee. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, let's
All right.
move on.
I think maybe we should move on. I think we've kind of, John, is there something we need to do as a committee now to kind of finalize this to put an end to this particular part legally?
You do technically have a motion out there that was seconded.
Okay.
You could just call for a all in favor, then an all opposed, but the idea would be that the motion is the idea that there'll be an ordinance prepared and ready to be presented to the council by Julie as the spokesperson with help from Meg and others. And that would probably be the what's on the table. Does that sound correct, Grant?
Right,
Correct.
it does, especially and include the caveat that we get to look at it before before it goes to the council. That's all. We're set.
Yeah.
And my
Mark, you're
second
okay
still
with that?
stands.
Right.
Perfect.
Amen.
Okay, so I guess what I'll do is I will ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
Oh,
Who said that?
no, I just said, whoa.
Oh, okay.
We're rolling.
Okay. I was like, what? So John, and Lynn, I guess the motion passed. And
Yep.
we will move on to the second one. which, can you put the program back up again for me, John? Because I seem to have
Oh,
misplaced mine.
One thing we need to do is thank Greg for his time.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely, Rob.
And
Thank you.
ask him if he has any further thoughts before he signs out.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for keeping, and this is new to me. So Greg, we
So
really
Rob,
want
why
to
don't you
thank
take him to lunch?
We went to lunch here about 3 weeks ago before we had to
Can't go
socially
lunch.
distance.
So Greg, if you have anything you'd like to share with us before we let you go home and to your family and stuff, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity to share some things. I sit back and thought, okay, have I created a firestorm for you all? But I do just want to give just kind of a last thought is to make sure you really know where you want to go. You know, as you've talked about the 6 months and everything out, if you don't know where you're going to go first, the 6 months is going to go by quickly, and then you're going to be in where you are right now.
Absolutely.
If you know where you want to go, what things you really want to be looking at, come to that conclusion first, and then move forward. So that's just kind of my one thought, because 6 months is not a lot of time. And
It's not.
sometimes it's better to make sure you have your plan already in place of what you want to do, and then implement it that way.
That's a really good suggestion, Greg. Maybe what we could do is all of us put together our thoughts and shoot them out to everybody, so we can see if there's a consensus on some things that we know for sure we're going to move toward.
Grant, I was just thinking the same thing. If members of the committee could put like their thoughts on paper and share it with us, I think that would help us all to kind of see what we find in common and what we don't find in common. And maybe that's where we go from there, is what are the common things that we have that we can say, okay, yay, we've got it all under control. Well, not under control, but
well, and
we've got a vision.
Yeah, I like the walkway. If we had the Excalibur hotel there too, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, this is Mayor Berube. Long time no see. Thanks for helping us out tonight.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And I look at John Jansen, I made his beard go gray.
Okay, so the next, number 3 is further discussion and review of future land use for from the February 26, 2020 General Plan Steering Committee meeting. And John will be our presenter. So John, I'm turning the time over to you.
So this is not intended, this was intended to just make sure we didn't miss the reconnection on this. I'm not sure if each of you went through and looked at your maps that you created last time. But the idea is there's two ways to go from where we're at now. We could take these maps and try to combine them into a group consensus map that would then be further refined into an actual general plan map amendment. Or we could take each individual map and have the group vote on them to talk about which one they like more, which one they like less, and then use that as a model to make some sort of a general plan amendment. Any strong feelings one way or the other?
So John?
Oh, go ahead, John Arrington.
John, this is Mark. Would you explain the colors again, please? Oh, that's a dirty word. I apologize.
No, you are fine. So I printed out and handed out the sheets that told you exactly which color meant what. And apparently I did not save that file on my computer, and the recording did not work last meeting. So let me tell you what I remember. The lighter colors are the less dense areas. The darker colors are the more dense, but I'm 100% sure that that is not entirely correct. But maybe, I mean, I think we stuck with yellow as kind of the R110, because that's the current R110 color is yellow. So I apologize. I don't know how I didn't save that sheet. and we ended up without a copy. We collected all the maps and we didn't keep the sheets. So,
John, just a quick question. You've looked over them all, compared them. Are there any commonalities that just jump out to you right off the bat? 'Cause
I think there are a lot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Myself, I looked at them too. I think there are a lot of common suggestions.
So I have a question, John Carl.
Yeah.
If you do an overlay of all these maps, just to kind of give us an idea, is that what you're planning on doing, is kind of overlaying all, I don't remember how many there were now, was it 5 or 6 of them? If you overlay them, would that give us an idea of kind of what we came up with?
I think so. At the very least, it gives us an idea of the areas that the groups were focusing on.
Okay.
And, you know, like I know, for example, on the map that's in front of you, the coloring's not amazing, but there's some green scribbles that are included over top. And I think that that is I think green was intended to be the conservation area. Yeah, or the least dense of all of them. Okay. Because that's kind of been a common theme. So I have been trying to interpret the maps based on my memory of the colors.
Okay.
But I like I said, I know that I'm not interpreting them 100%. And some of the colors didn't come through amazing, but like you can see, I'm not sure if you can, well.
It looks like the green there is like the RE20s is what they've got in green right there.
Right. So it's either the least dense or the conservation area. And so, you know, obviously this group wanted to save a lot of the existing stuff that's there is the impression this map gave.
Yeah.
Down in the lower section, there's that brown color. And I think that was where there was some openness to density, but I will make one more run at trying to find the color coding. It's just I meant to do it one more run this afternoon, but I got tied up in another discussion and didn't get a chance to it, but I'll do my best.
Okay. Yeah, if you just do an overlay and send it out to us so that we can kind of see what commonalities we saw. I think that would give people a really good idea of, I think it would help us even more with this decision that we've made on this land use stuff. So
one thing that might be helpful on this one that's in front of you right now, it would be really helpful to hear from the group. We don't have a current proposal given to us, at least not an active proposal, but we do have a proposal that anticipates this type of a development where you're having some open space and some density that are crushing together. I don't want to say, well, crushing might be the best word, but they're coming together with I would call it some sort of a design, right? Like they've thought through this and they've incorporated.
Right. Yeah, that was on a mixed group along with Gordon. You know, and the bottom line is the top part there was kind of a line as to where we thought Skyline Drive was going to go. Park City, the vision of the group was that some upscale Park City kind of condos there that are very expensive, very upscale, high density, but Park City kind of high density, and then a lot of area around it where there's really either no development, green space, or the brown there I think was a natural feature that we couldn't do anything with anyway, so we were gonna leave that the way it was. But that was the philosophy up in that end.
Okay.
And so that, you know, that's the kind of thought is, does the group want to go to more of, remember we pulled the polka dots in the puzzle and we looked at how those those shapes mesh together? There's two approaches. One is this, that almost is more like a puzzle piece where you have some things overlapping and some exchange of density for open space and utilizing a smaller area. Or the other option is to continue with kind of bigger blocks, bigger generic or homogeneous type zones. And so I just, that would be one thing I think would be helpful for the group to provide some feedback on tonight. And I know we've already been an hour and a half, so I don't want to drag it out. I just want to, I think that might help frame the next discussion, because tying back to Christina's question earlier, I think this is the main purpose why we've extended beyond the moderate income housing is how are we going to look at what the future land use map will look like? And is there a change that's going to be recommended?
So John, could you take all of these maps and maybe look and see the commonalities that they have, and then maybe overlap some of the, like I noticed like in this one, in the HP1s and HP2s and HP3s, there's, you know, several different uses. And I'm wondering if, you know, if we could overlap that to see what other maps showed. I mean, we can look through them, but sometimes you're rolling back and forth and stuff like that. I think an overlay, I think, would be really useful to give us an idea, or like you said, you know, this is what we saw up on HP1 is either all, you know, low density or a mishmash. And then that would kind of, you know, give us an idea.
Yes, we, my guess is between Lynn and myself, Lynn has some Adobe skills that we can put something together that might show, if it only shows up on one map as yellow, it would be a very low. And if it showed up on 2 or 3 or 4 maps, then it'd become a darker, richer color.
Okay.
And
I think that's a good idea.
But I imagine that I will be relying heavily on Lynn to help me work this through, because she has the software and I think she knows what she's doing better than I do. So
I think the areas that are common would be great, because we don't have to spend a lot of discussion on those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Any comments from the committee on this?
I just appreciate all the work the staff's doing, because this, you look at the problem we've had tonight and they have to deal with this.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that kind of covers everything for that section. Now, do we have anything from the committee members? Is there anything they want to share? Things they want to feel with us? Whatever. Anybody?
Well, I'm really excited. I think we have a chance to bring order from chaos, and that's always exciting. And for our community, it's really needed. And we need to follow through this time to make sure it gets all the way through the city council and doesn't hit a brick wall.
Okay. And anybody else?
I think I concur with Grant. We need to keep the city council informed and make sure that they realize how important this is to the long-term success of the city and keeping North Ogden the city that we've all come to love. And
Who else? Is that Christina that just?
Yes, I
Go
was
ahead,
just wondering
Christina.
what else would you like us to be doing in the meantime besides writing up this proposal for the city council?
I think most probably making yourself, at least for me, aware of what's in the general plan right now, you know, how the general plan does work. It is online, so you can go and pull, you know, look at that and just kind of get an idea kind of what they had in 2015 and where we feel we need to go now we're in 2020. And especially in this day and in this moment where, you know, things are changing, you know, the economy is not doing well, you know, we're struggling through all of this. It alters a lot of things within our city of what we can and can't do and stuff like that, because I know for me, my husband, his company, when they do their projected budget this year, they went with the worst case scenario. They said, we're not even going to look at like the possibility of just a small percentage of loss. They went with the worst case scenario. And in doing so, they made some excellent choices, and they have now laid off 5 people. They furloughed them is all they've done. And that is it for the rest of the year. And so I think as a city, you know, we're going to have to kind of do those same kind of things. And as this committee, we're going to have to do those kind of things too. You know, we're going to have to look, where are we going to be 6 months, 12 months from now? We really don't know where this is taking us. You know, it's a whole new experience and adventure for us all. So
Well, Joey,
anybody else? Go ahead.
This is the mayor. If you can tell us where we're going to be in 6 to 12 months, I'm going to give you a big award.
I'm going to be in this house, Mayor.
Because
So,
I know we can't.
I think your point is well taken here. Things are changing very rapidly. When you look at the change that's happening in retail and businesses and what
Yep.
they're looking at in the future, it's not a lot of brick and mortar.
Yep.
It's more e-commerce related things. We're going to have more of a, I think, leaner economy. But I
Yep.
would just like to say overall in the general plan, and you've heard this before, obviously a lot of things have changed since 2015. I'm not being critical of the vision that happened back there. I think it was
No,
very visionary.
absolutely.
As I've said, I'd like to see a plan that is realistic
Mhm.
for our city and is simple for us to understand. When we brought up the walkable point, I think, you know, we kind of changed that when we put a car wash along there.
Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with now. And so I would just say, let's deal in reality.
Perfect.
Let's make sure we have a plan that can be followed and is simple and understandable.
Mhm.
But the 2015 plan, you know, and Rob may beat me up and John may shoot me later, but we don't have to be bound by that because a lot of things have changed since then. As Grant pointed out, we're probably not going to build an MGM hotel that will need a bridge over 2600. Maybe we are. I don't know. Rob may have that in his CBD. I keep telling him he's got to come up with another term other than CBD.
Yeah.
Well, you got to come up with something different, Rob. They're going to get confused now with the cannabis stuff.
Amen.
Mayor, I'm sure that in your world, you have acronyms. There's no place that has more acronyms than planning.
I know, it's just the CBD. It's like the CBD oils and all the stuff that's coming out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
We're not wedded to the term.
But I do agree that we've got to get rid of this mishmash and get something that we can follow. And, you know, as John has said, one of the things that shouldn't drop off our plate is the general plan should it be vested?
Yeah. Now the only comment I have is we've not heard from Charlotte tonight, and she always has really astute, erudite comments to make. And so I just like to get a comment from her. She's been very quiet.
Charlotte, you've been put on the spot.
I guess I have. Thanks, Grant. No, I think this is good. I think that it's a good idea for all of us to review the general plan that we did come up with 5 years ago. I think we had a lot of good ideas then. And like the mayor said, we just need to look at how things have changed and what we can adjust, but look at the vision that we had for North Ogden then and see how that fits with our downtown area now and kind of bring some of those ideas to the new revisions.
Well, I don't want this meeting to go on much longer, so I'm going to ask the staff. Rob, do you have any last words for us tonight? Thank you for staying with us. We appreciate it.
Appreciate everybody's willingness to contribute. Thank you.
Hey, Julie, I have to have a response that, you know, Rob talks about all these acronyms.
Okay.
And I appreciate Charlotte's comments. I would say in the grocery business, sometimes we put the same label on it and call it new and improved. So maybe we have a plan that's got a good basis and we call it new and improved.
There we go. Sounds like a plan. Lynn, do you have anything for us?
Nothing for you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, John Call, do you have anything for us?
Nope. I'll see if I can steal an ordinance from somewhere that might give us some direction so that we can get it out to you pretty quickly.
Sounds good. Well, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff tonight. I appreciate your time. We went a little longer than we did, but I think we accomplished a lot tonight. So I'm asking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mark Brown.
A second. We need a second.
Seconded.
Thank you. Who was that?
Santa.
Okay. Thanks, Santa. Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned, and I will let you get to your evenings and your families. Thank you.
So then you,
Good night.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody. Thanks.
and then you hit end meeting, and it'll just end it for